I'm making this video in response to some of the comments I received on my MS660 clone saw teardown video. I believe I had that video titled MS660 clone saw major failure. I'm going to go over these comments now, but please stay tuned to the end of the video. I'm going to show what actually happened to the saw again a little bit closer, so hopefully you can see it better. I have all the main components of the engine here. I have the case halves, the crankshaft, the piston, and the cylinder. One of the most popular comments I got on this failure was that the oil ratio was wrong because I was running 50-to-1 oil. Well, I just noticed here, you can see there's plenty of oil in the crankcase, other than it's just been laying around and attracting dust and dirt now. And there's oil coming out the exhaust port, and there's actually oil in the muffler, which I don't have over here. If this problem was related to the oil ratio, there'd be transfer from the piston on the cylinder, which there's not. You can see the cylinder is clean and smooth. Flip it over so you can see the exhaust side. Here. Then another popular comment I got was that I was running the wrong type of oil. A lot of people seem to think that I should have been running a castor based oil. I'm not going to run a castor oil and a piece of outdoor power equipment because castor oil separates at temperatures below 32 degrees, and this saw is going to be used below 32 degrees, so that oil wouldn't be any good for me. Then had a few people say that it was the cross cylinder, that it was junk, that the base on it was not square. I don't have a really good way to check it. The proper way to check it would be to put it on a lathe with a dial indicator and rotate it and see how much it's actually out. I don't think that's the problem. I also had a few people say that the crank wasn't centered, which that's not the case. The crank was centered. Then had someone say that the piston was hitting the head. If that was the case, there would be some witness marks on the piston. I don't see any. And there would be some down inside the cylinder. Don't see anything. And someone also said that the base gasket was leaking, that they could see carbon blowing out. The base gasket was thrown away after the teardown. But if that was the case, you would see a presence of carbon on the cylinder base or the crankcase, and I don't see any. And then just to show that the saw was not running lean, there's a plug. I just tuned the saw and it was running, you can see, rich, which once I started cutting with it, the plug would have cleaned up, because when I tuned it, of course, it was 4-stroking, so that'll make the plug black, but then the plug will clean up a little bit in the cut. So again, what actually happened was the big end rod bearing failed on this crankshaft. You can see even the connecting rod was hot. And then also the PTO side or clutch side crank bearing got hot. That may have been a secondary failure to the rod bearing because of the rod bearing locking up. And then when it locked up, the rod was still turning, so that meant that it was basically flat spotting the big end rod bearing, the pins on the rod bearing, and that material had to go somewhere, so it went all throughout the engine. And I don't know if you can hear this. Can't really. But this bearing is rough. So the bearing matter from the crankshaft probably affected this crank bearing. and then it definitely, you can see the marks where the bearing material came up past the piston. It's not transfer, it's scratches in the piston, and there are some light scratches in the cylinder from the bearing material. Again, it's not transfer. So now my next steps to getting this all back to going are take the crank bearings out, have new crank bearings. I'm going to clean everything up in a parts washer and reinstall new bearings, new crankshaft, a new piston with rings, and see how it runs at that point.